Ever wondered what a spare $100 million buys in Hollywood's Golden Age real estate? Take Jack Warner's sprawling Benedict Canyon estate, complete with its own 9-hole golf course, recently snapped up by Jeff Bezos for a record-shattering $165 million, or Marion Davies's Seaside Palace in Santa Monica, a 110-room Georgian marvel that cost a staggering $7 million to build in 1929. And that's only the beginning. Stay with us as we climb the price ladder through 20 mansions that define luxury and legend. 1. Jane Mansfield's Pink Palace, 10,100 Sunset Boulevard, Holmby Hills. Originally a 1920s Mediterranean-style mansion, Mansfield bought it in 1957 for $76,000. She promptly transformed it into her famous Pink Palace. Mansfield spent lavishly to remake the home in her image, literally painting everything pink and adding over-the-top touches. She installed a heart-shaped swimming pool, built by Hargitay, with tiles spelling out, "I love you, Janie." The estate sat on 3.5 acres behind pink stone walls and a gate with her initials. Inside, Mansfield indulged in whimsical decor: Cupid statues, heart-themed fireplaces, a pink shag-carpeted bathroom with a heart-shaped tub, and even a champagne fountain. The couple claimed the house had 25 rooms, 11 bathrooms, though some sources said 40 rooms, including small spaces. It was truly a shrine to Mansfield's persona. Literally a pink palace, in the words of one account. While the purchase price was modest by Hollywood standards, Mansfield's extensive customizations and flamboyant renovations made the Pink Palace legendary. The sheer uniqueness, from imported pink quartz in the exterior paint to bespoke fixtures, signaled extravagance even if not costly in a traditional sense. The home itself became part of Mansfield's brand, attracting crowds of curious onlookers who clogged Sunset Boulevard hoping to glimpse its rosy exterior. Mansfield hosted wild Hollywood parties here. The publicity around the Pink Palace kept her on the news. Celebrities like Ringo Starr and Mama Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas owned it after Mansfield's untimely death in 1967, and singer Engelbert Humperdinck lived there 17 years. 2. Marilyn Monroe's Brentwood home, 12,305 Fifth Helena Drive, Brentwood. A cozy Spanish colonial revival house built in 1929. Monroe purchased it in early 1962 for $77,500, notably the only home she ever owned. Tragically, she lived here only a few months until her death in August 1962. Monroe's home was one-story, L-shaped, tucked at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The property spanned over half an acre, with lush gardens and a swimming pool in back. The white stucco house itself was modest by superstar standards: 4 bedrooms, terracotta tile floors, and exposed wood beam ceilings that Monroe herself selected during renovations. She added personal touches, like Mexican tile and antique furniture, to create a warm, intimate atmosphere. A small guest house and plenty of foliage for privacy were also on the grounds. Compared to the grand estates of Monroe's peers, this home was relatively small and inexpensive. Part of its charm was simplicity. However, its value skyrocketed due to Monroe's fame and the home's poignant history. Monroe sought refuge here away from Hollywood's glare, valuing its seclusion. In terms of historic context, its approximately $77,000 price tag was moderate. But as the beloved last residence of an icon, it became priceless to fans. Sadly, this house became the site of Monroe's tragic death in 1962, casting a shadow over its serenity. However, in her final months, Monroe enjoyed gardening and quiet evenings here, hosting intimate visits with friends. The home has since been seen as a symbol of Monroe's vulnerability and desire for an ordinary life. It was often photographed after her death, becoming an object of fascination for devotees. 3. Charlton Heston's star-shaped Beverly Hills home, 2859 Coldwater Canyon Drive, Beverly Hills. Custom built in the mid-20th century, circa 1950s. Heston, a major film star of the 1950s to 60s, moved in around 1959 and lived here for nearly 50 years until his death in 2008. The Heston estate is notable for its unique shape. The house was designed in a half-star configuration, giving it a one-of-a-kind footprint. It had 7 bedrooms and sprawling living spaces designed with an open, flowing floor plan divided by glass walls. A dramatic library with towering ceilings served as a centerpiece. The primary bedroom suite occupied its own wing of the star, ensuring privacy. Outside, the property's hillside location afforded panoramic canyon views, with amenities like a pool and terraces tucked into the angular layout. Heston's longtime residence wasn't among the largest mansions in Hollywood, but its distinctive architecture and celebrity provenance made it valuable. By the 21st century, homes in this Beverly Hills enclave were highly prized. After Heston's passing, filmmaker Luc Besson purchased it for a bit over $12 million in 2010. Besson even envisioned expanding the home significantly, reflecting the high redevelopment potential of the site. Heston was a Hollywood statesman, and his home hosted many industry gatherings over the decades. Being a stable family residence, it wasn't known for wild parties, but it was the backdrop to Heston's meetings with figures like Ronald Reagan and other friends. Heston's 5-decade occupancy also means the property remained largely frozen in time, stylistically. 4. Audrey Hepburn's Holmby Hills Mansion, 100 Delphern Drive, Holmby Hills, built in 1938, designed by noted architect Paul R. Williams. Audrey Hepburn lived here in the 1950s during her Hollywood heyday. Later owners included actress Mia Farrow, actor David Niven, and most famously, socialite actress Eva Gabor. A classic Holmby Hills estate on about 1.1 acres, this mansion exudes 1930s glamour. It is a Georgian colonial revival-style 2-story house of roughly 7,000 square feet, with a crisp white facade and red shutters framing its windows. The interiors featured elegant touches like mirrored walls and a sweeping staircase with velvet carpeting, still intact after decades. The estate included 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, plus separate quarters for staff and a guest house, reflecting its design for hosting and comfort. Outside were manicured gardens, a swimming pool and tennis court, providing the full suite of luxury amenities. In the late 1930s, commissioning Paul Williams, an architect to the stars, ensured a top-tier budget. The result was a home of enduring style and quality, making it a coveted property. Its ownership by a succession of Hollywood stars boosted its cachet. By 2017, it was officially known as the Eva Gabor Estate and hit the market for nearly $14 million. The combination of elite Holmby Hills location, architectural pedigree, and celebrity lineage made it a consistently high-value mansion. Under Audrey Hepburn, the home was reportedly a serene retreat. She and husband Mel Ferrer entertained intimate gatherings here during the late 1950s. Eva Gabor, who owned it for many years, filled the home with old Hollywood glamour. It became a hub for socialites and film friends. The estate's guest house allowed luminaries to stay in comfort. Princess Grace of Monaco once visited, according to lore. Every owner maintained the home's reputation for tasteful entertainment rather than raucous parties. 5. The Garden of Allah. 8150 Sunset Boulevard, West Hollywood. The original mansion was built in 1907 to 1918 by William H. Hay, a real estate developer. Nazimova rented it in 1918 and soon purchased it, naming it Garden of Allah after herself, a play on the famous novel The Garden of Allah. The estate featured a rambling Mediterranean-style villa set amid lush tropical gardens, which inspired its name. The property spanned 2.5 acres at the western end of the Sunset Strip. Nazimova's mansion had grand rooms with European decor and was surrounded by luxurious grounds, pathways, vine-covered trellises, orchards, and a large swimming pool. It exuded a decadent Jazz-Age vibe, with touches like imported furnishings from France and a sunken Persian-style bath. In the early 1920s, Nazimova added bungalow suites among the gardens to host friends, unknowingly laying the groundwork for a future hotel complex. Building the Garden of Allah took over a decade, a labor of love and money by Hay and later Nazimova. By 1920, it was one of the most impressive private residences in L.A., effectively a small estate hotel. Maintaining the expansive gardens and big houses proved costly. When Nazimova's film career faltered by 1921, the financial strain of the estate was so great that she converted it into a commercial hotel to recoup costs. In its heyday as a residence, its continuous lavish improvements and maintenance made it an expensive indulgence. As a private home, Nazimova's Garden of Allah was site of legendary parties. She threw massive soirees for Hollywood's artistic crowd. Authors F. Scott Fitzgerald and Dorothy Parker, actors Charlie Chaplin and Rudolph Valentino all reveled in its gardens at various times. It became synonymous with free-spirited excess. After converting to the Garden of Allah Hotel around 1927, it hosted long-term celebrity residents like Humphrey Bogart, Marlene Dietrich, and Errol Flynn. Its bungalows became a bohemian haven where the likes of Fitzgerald worked on scripts and Tallulah Bankhead caused scandals. The garden's rollicking reputation as an early Hollywood playground was unmatched. 6. Cecil B. DeMille's Estate, 2000 DeMille Drive, Laughlin Park, Los Feliz, built in 1914 by architect B. Cooper Corbett. DeMille bought the property in 1916 for $27,893 and lived there for over 40 years until his death in 1959. The DeMille Estate is a Beaux-Arts meets Italian villa mansion perched on the highest hill of gated Laughlin Park. The house spans about 7,500 square feet, with 15 rooms, including grand formal living and dining rooms. Classic features like French doors, ornate moldings, and a columned portico give it a stately presence. The property encompasses approximately 2 acres of terraced grounds, the largest lot in that exclusive enclave. DeMille added a pool and perhaps a small private screening room. Lush landscaping, a tea house, and an arched pergola adorn the gardens. The elevated site provided views across the city to the ocean, a fitting panorama for Hollywood royalty. In the 1910s, this mansion was one of the first deluxe movie industry homes in Los Angeles. DeMille's purchase price of approximately $28,000 was significant at the time, and he continually invested in the home. As the head of Paramount Pictures, he could afford to embellish the estate with imported marble, fine art, and custom furnishings, making it a showplace. Its location in a gated community of baronial homes, neighbors included Charlie Chaplin and W.C. Fields, and sheer size made it incredibly valuable. By the mid-20th century, the DeMille Estate had become known as the most legendary estate in Los Feliz, commanding a multi-million-dollar price tag to this day. DeMille often hosted lavish garden parties here for Hollywood's elite. In fact, Hollywood legend claims that he filmed scenes for King of Kings, 1927, in his own extensive gardens, using them as the Garden of Gethsemane backdrop. Regular visitors included stars like Gloria Swanson and heads of state. The estate also witnessed high-level studio meetings. DeMille reportedly planned productions from his home office. For decades after his death, the house remained in his family's possession, unused but intact, further mystifying onlookers. 7. Errol Flynn's Mulholland Farm, 7740 Mulholland Drive, Hollywood Hills. Owner, Errol Flynn. Actor. Built, purchased. Constructed in 1941. To Flynn's specifications on an 11.5-acre hilltop parcel he bought in the late 1930s. Flynn moved in during his swashbuckling prime, dubbing it Mulholland Farm. Flynn's estate was a rustic two-story country-style home that he intentionally modeled after a Connecticut farmhouse for a casual vibe. It had white siding and a pitched roof, an unpretentious exterior belying what went on inside. Flynn continually expanded the property. He added a circular stable complex, inspired by Vienna's Lipizzaner horse stables, for his horses, built a private gym, and even constructed a hidden casino. The interiors reflected Flynn's pirate film persona, a den designed as a pirate's lair complete with a ship's wheel and exotic animal skins on the floor. Notorious features included secret passageways, two-way mirrors, and peepholes installed throughout the house, reportedly so Flynn could spy on guests or avoid unwanted visitors. The grounds offered sweeping views of the San Fernando Valley and had a swimming pool and gardens, but much of the land remained open ranch land for riding. Flynn's project escalated in cost due to his constant additions. He quipped that the house went up fast, like the sails of a boat, as expenses soared from an initial $35,000 to $125,000 by completion, a hefty sum in 1941. The combination of a vast 11-plus acres in the Hollywood Hills and Flynn's elaborate custom features made Mulholland Farm a uniquely expensive bachelor pad. Its covert rooms and bespoke constructions were indulgences few others would pour money into, but Flynn's success and lifestyle demanded it. Mulholland Farm became infamous for Flynn's wild parties during the 1940s. This was the ultimate bachelor hangout. Hollywood starlets, fellow actors, and assorted revelers would drink and gamble in the secret casino and cavort by the pool. The estate's naughty reputation, the most notorious house in Hollywood, was such that it inspired the phrase, "in like Flynn." Guests from Spencer Tracy to jazz musicians jammed in the wee hours. It was also rumored that FBI surveillance during Flynn's statutory scandal found hidden observation posts in the house. Flynn lived here through his tumultuous later career, finally selling it in the 1950s. 8. Buster Keaton's Italian-style Beverly Hills estate, Laurel Lane near Doheny Road, Beverly Hills, constructed in 1926 for Keaton at the height of his silent film success. The purchase of the land and construction was financed by Keaton, and in part by his in-laws, the Talmadge sisters. Keaton's estate was a 20-room Spanish colonial revival mansion just steps from the Beverly Hills Hotel. Designed by architect Jean Verge, it had the aura of a Mediterranean villa with white stucco walls and a red-tiled roof. Signature features included a second-story stone balcony, a grand wood front door with wrought iron detailing, and a courtyard fountain surrounded by colorful flowers. Inside, the home boasted towering beamed ceilings and large arched windows. There was an opulent entertainment room outfitted with a bar, music area, billiards and card tables, cleverly convertible into a private movie theater at the push of a button. The design accommodated the couple's unusual arrangement. Buster and Natalie famously maintained separate wings of the mansion. Each had a private bedroom suite and even separate entrances. Keaton had his own door leading out, and Natalie had a dedicated clothes room the size of a boutique. Live-in servants had their own quarters near the kitchen, illustrating the estate's luxurious provision for staff. Outside, Keaton installed a tennis court and gardens on the manicured grounds. Keaton spared no expense on this dream home. He spent an estimated $300,000, a huge sum in 1926, to build and furnish it, showing off the fortune he amassed from hits like The General. The estate's scale, with 20 rooms and advanced amenities, like a built-in projector for the home theater, made it one of the priciest comedian-owned homes of the era. In fact, one historian noted it was a true movie star estate reflective of Keaton's success, an extravagance that unfortunately coincided with the stock market crash a few years later. Keaton's estate became a gathering place for Hollywood friends. He hosted Sunday parties with croquet on the lawn and screenings in the private theater, entertaining pals like Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks. However, by the early 1930s, Keaton's finances and marriage were collapsing. After his divorce from Natalie in 1932, he had to sell the property to pay debts. The estate subsequently passed through various hands and was even subdivided, its glory seemingly fading. 9. Rudolph Valentino's Falcon Lair, 1436 Bella Drive, Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills. Owner, Rudolph Valentino, actor. Built twice purchased. Valentino purchased the property in 1925 for $175,000, naming it Falcon Lair after his film The Hooded Falcon. The estate's main house had been constructed a few years earlier in Spanish Revival style. Valentino customized it after buying. Falcon Lair was a Spanish colonial revival mansion perched atop Bella Drive in Benedict Canyon. Valentino's modifications gave it an Italianate flair to honor his heritage. He landscaped terraced Italian gardens with cypress trees and fountains on the steep hillside. The mansion itself was opulent yet rustic, featuring white adobe walls, red clay roof tiles, and wrought iron balconies. It reportedly had 8 bedrooms, including a master suite with hand-painted ceilings. Valentino added horse stables on the grounds to accommodate his beloved horses. He filled Falcon Lair with treasures from his travels: medieval Italian furniture, tapestries, and a trove of exotic collectibles, turning the interior into a veritable museum of nostalgia. A long private driveway climbed to the estate, providing sweeping views of the canyon and city below. At $175,000 in 1925, equivalent to about $2.8 million today, Falcon Lair was extremely costly, one of the highest prices paid for a Hollywood star's home at the time. Valentino's fame as the Latin lover of silent film made every aspect of his life larger than life, and Falcon Lair was no exception. The combination of a large acreage, luxurious house, and Valentino's expensive taste for antiques and purebred horses meant the estate was a financial strain. In fact, unbeknownst to many, Valentino went into debt to maintain it. Falcon Lair was Valentino's sanctuary, where he hosted elegant but intimate gatherings, tea parties with industry friends like Vilma Banchi, and dinners under the pergola. He also courted Pola Negri there in the final months of his life. However, Valentino's untimely death at 31 in 1926, less than a year after moving in, meant he never fully basked in Falcon Lair's glory. After his passing, estate creditors revealed Valentino's finances were upside down. The mansion and land had to be sold to pay off his debts. Nevertheless, its romantic image endured. Later owners included heiress Doris Duke and tobacco mogul Harry Grants, who preserved Valentino's legacy at the property. 10. Harry Warner's Beverly Hills Tudor Estate, 1006 North Rexford Drive, Beverly Hills. Built in 1923 during Warner's rise in Hollywood. Harry Warner lived here through the 1920s to 30s, and it remained in his family for decades. A striking Tudor Revival mansion with French country influences, the Harry Warner estate sits on about 1.25 acres in the Beverly Hills Flats. The mansion itself is approximately 13,000 square feet, with 7 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. Characterized by steep gables, half-timbered facades, and leaded glass windows, it evoked an English manner. Inside, rich wood paneling and grand fireplaces set an old-world tone. The property included sumptuous features such as a screening room, befitting a studio chief, a library, and a ballroom-sized living room. Manicured lawns and gardens surround the house, and Warner added a north-south lighted tennis court on the grounds, a rarity at the time. A separate guest house on the lot hosted many Hollywood luminaries, and legend holds that Marilyn Monroe stayed in the guest cottage during her early career. As a top Hollywood executive, Harry Warner built one of the first true mogul mansions. It was lavish for its era, and by the 2010s it remained remarkably intact. When it was listed in 2016, the asking price was $40 million, reflecting not only the sizable house and prime Beverly Hills location, but also its historical significance. Warner's estate had been lovingly maintained and even updated with modern systems by subsequent owners, making it a turnkey piece of history. Its use as a film location, it appeared as O.J. Simpson's house in a TV series, and as an event space for political fundraisers, hosted by later owners, added to its value. In the 1920s to 40s, this estate saw frequent gatherings of Hollywood's power players. Harry and his wife Rhea held garden parties and charity balls here. Guests included fellow studio heads and stars under Warner Brothers contract. During World War II, the Warners hosted events to support war bonds. Decades later, under new ownership, the mansion was used for high-profile events. For example, it served as a fundraiser venue for politicians like Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, who capitalized on its grandeur and privacy. 11. The Edie Goetz Estate, 1050 Carrollwood Drive, Holmby Hills. Completed in 1938, a wedding gift of sorts from Edie's father. The Goetzes lived here for decades mid-century. A stately Georgian-style mansion, the Edie Goetz Estate, was designed by the eminent architect Gordon B. Kaufman, who also did Greystone Mansion. It sits on 4.5 acres of prime Holmby Hills land. The house itself is symmetrical and elegant, with red brick and white columns reminiscent of an East Coast manor. Inside are 11 bedrooms and many lavish entertaining spaces, from a ballroom-like living room to a mirrored bar lounge. A standout feature is the screening room where Hollywood's finest watched films at Edie's parties. The grounds were a virtual playground, rolling lawns, formal gardens, a swimming pool, and even a tennis court. Additionally, a separate guest house on an adjacent parcel, not included when the estate sold later, was often used to host Hollywood friends in private. With essentially unlimited studio money behind her, Edie Goetz created a true showplace. Every element, from French antiques to custom plaster work, was top quality. The cost in 1938 was not publicized, but given the size and designer, it surely ran into the hundreds of thousands. This estate became legendary for its lavish parties, which also bolstered its aura of luxury. In 2017, investor Nicholas Berggruen bought the property for $40.8 million, a testament to its enduring value. In fact, it was so desirable that the guest house alone was valued at an additional $37 million. Edie Goetz was nicknamed Hollywood's hostess with the mostest. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, she threw legendary parties at this estate. The annual Oscar night parties at Edie's were the most coveted invitation in town. Stars like Gary Cooper, Cary Grant, Judy Garland, and dozens more mingled on her lawn into the wee hours. Themed costume balls, charity galas, and intimate dinners happened constantly. With Mayer's MGM influence and Bill Getz's own studio ties, he headed Universal International. The guest list often included virtually every A-list star and mogul in Hollywood. The estate's gracious layout, with terraces and a grand foyer, was perfect for such glittering gatherings. It was said that deals were made and marriages arranged under Edie's chandeliers. 12th. Louis B. Mayer's Estate, 512 North Street, Cloud Road, Bel Air. The original mansion was built in the 1920s, exact date unknown, in Bel Air. Mayer, the powerful MGM boss, purchased it in 1949 and lived there until his death in 1957. Mayer's estate was a 10,000-square-foot mansion in classic European Revival style. The design was elegant and imposing, suitable for the man often called the King of Hollywood. It likely had a mix of French Normandy and Georgian design cues, with limestone accents, tall chimneys, and formal symmetry. Indoors were luxurious formal rooms, a two-story entry hall, a paneled library, and a dining room that could seat dozens. The estate included guest quarters, a pool, and extensive gardens along St. Cloud Road. Mayer's property occupied one of Bel Air's prime lots, and he even bought and tore down a neighbor's house to enlarge the grounds. Mayer was one of the highest-paid men in America in the 1940s, so expense was no object. By the time he bought this mansion in '49, it was an established grand estate. The cost was not widely reported, but Bel Air mansions in that era sold in the high six figures. The real expense came later, maintaining such a vast property and modernizing it. After Mayer's death, successive owners found the upkeep and needed renovations overwhelming. Eventually, rather than update the aging 1920s structure, they chose to start anew, an indicator that the cost to refurbish exceeded even a lavish new build. Mayer's estate served as a backdrop to many MGM celebrations and private negotiations. Dignitaries like Winston Churchill visited him there. It's said that the idea for the Academy Awards as an organization was schemed by Mayer, perhaps, in his study. However, by the late 1950s, the house saw fewer grand events as Mayer's health declined. After he died, comedian Jerry Lewis briefly owned it. One source notes Lewis as an interim owner, and he may have hosted some Hollywood friends there in the early 1960s. 13. Samuel Goldwyn's Estate, 1200 Laurel Lane, Beverly Hills. Construction began in 1934 and finished by 1937. The Goldwyns made it their family home for the next 78 years. The estate remained with the Goldwyn family until 2015. The Goldwyn Estate is a Georgian Revival mansion designed by architects Douglas Honnold and George Vernon Russell. Sprawling over 11,000 square feet of living space on 2 levels, it features a stately brick exterior, shuttered windows, and a columned portico entry. Inside, the floor plan includes 7 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms, along with opulent formal rooms perfect for entertaining Golden Age stars. The living room, for instance, has an 18th-century French marble fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows opening to the grounds, a library with wood paneling, a sunroom, and Goldwyn's study, where he famously read scripts, are standout spaces. The estate's land is about 2 acres, landscaped with redolent gardens, a tennis court, and a large swimming pool. There is also a pool house and a detached screening room that Goldwyn added. Notably, in the 2010s, the property even contained a modern recording studio, installed by later owner Taylor Swift, tucked discreetly on site. Goldwyn spared no expense building a residence to match his status as Hollywood royalty. In the 1930s, having a custom mansion of this caliber placed him among the elite. The craftsmanship, hand-carved moldings, inlaid oak floors, etc., was top-notch. The estate's value also grew with time due to its storied provenance and prime Beverly Hills location. By the 2010s, it was designated a National Historic Landmark for its architectural and cultural significance. Taylor Swift purchased it in 2015 for $25 million and undertook a meticulous restoration, further adding to its historical value. Being one of the few Golden Age mansions continuously cared for by one family for over 80 years also meant it never fell into disrepair, keeping its worth high. The Goldwyns were known for their tasteful soirees. Throughout the 1930s to 50s, they hosted numerous garden parties and charity events on the grounds. Their guest list read like a who's who of film: Marlene Dietrich, Charlie Chaplin, Clark Gable, Katharine Hepburn, Frank Capra, Ginger Rogers. All these luminaries and more attended gatherings at the Goldwyn House. Even U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, visited during World War II. The estate was a backdrop for important studio negotiations and script discussions. In Goldwyn's library, classics like Wuthering Heights were pored over. In later decades, Sam Goldwyn Jr., who inherited the home, continued the tradition, hosting modern stars and industry leaders, thereby bridging old and new Hollywood. 14. Pickfair, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks Estate, 1143 Summit Drive, Beverly Hills. They bought the undeveloped 15-acre hillside in 1919 for $35,000 and soon built their mansion, which they christened Pickfair. Initial construction finished in 1920, with major expansions in 1930. Pickfair began as a humble hunting lodge, but Pickford and Fairbanks transformed it into a grand Tudor revival/Spanish colonial hybrid mansion. Architect Wallace Neff blended styles. By the 1930s, the home boasted 22 rooms, including sumptuous parlors and suites. A distinguishing feature was its large outdoor swimming pool, one of the first private pools ever built in Los Angeles. The estate included extensive gardens and a gated long driveway that kept it secluded. Inside, Pickfair was adorned with European antiques, medieval tapestries, and fine art that Mary collected. The couple added 2 new wings in 1930 to accommodate their needs. Ironically, as their marriage deteriorated, they each claimed one wing as personal quarters. Among its notable spaces was a grand dining hall where royalty dined and a sunroom filled with exotic birds. The property eventually shrank to about 2.7 acres as pieces were sold off over time, but the core estate remained opulent. At its peak, Pickfair was dubbed the Buckingham Palace of Hollywood. In the 1920s, its construction and continual upgrades cost a fortune. Fairbanks spared nothing in giving Mary her dream home. The introduction of a private pool itself set off a trend. Many wealthy Angelenos followed suit only after seeing Pickfairs. The estate's influence literally helped popularize Beverly Hills as the place for the rich and famous to build homes. Its high cost was justified by its role as a symbol of success. Owning Pickfair meant you had arrived in Hollywood. Even decades later, when sold in 1980, it fetched around $5.4 million despite the house's age, and later resales soared to ask prices of $60 million. Few homes in history have entertained as many legends as Pickfair. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, Mary and Doug played host to endless famous guests: Charlie Chaplin, Rudolph Valentino, Gloria Swanson, came for parties. Outside the film world, luminaries like aviator Amelia Earhart, scientist Albert Einstein, and literary giant F. Scott Fitzgerald visited. It was at Pickfair that political discussions were held. They hosted the King and Queen of Siam in 1931, and where the community often gathered, it served as temporary White House quarters for foreign dignitaries in L.A. The parties at Pickfair, including their legendary Sunday brunches and costume balls, were the stuff of Hollywood myth, frequently reported in fan magazines and setting a standard for celebrity hospitality. 15. The Hearst Davies Beverly House, 1011 North Beverly Drive, Beverly Hills. Built in 1926 for banker Milton Getz, designed by architect Gordon Kaufman. Hearst and Davies acquired it around 1946 for $120,000 when Hearst's health forced them to leave his San Simeon castle. Often called Beverly House, this mansion is an Italianate Mediterranean palace, melding Spanish and Italian styles. Set on about 5 acres off Sunset Boulevard, it features a H-shaped main mansion with 8 bedrooms and 15 bathrooms. Hallmark elements include hand-carved ceilings, a 2-story wood-paneled library, and a billiard room with a carved stone fireplace. A massive refectory-style dining room can seat 22 guests under its intricately carved ceiling. Perhaps most famous is the 50-foot-long colonnaded loggia with arched glass doors opening to the gardens, a space used famously in movies. It was the site of the horsehead scene in The Godfather. The estate also boasts an Olympic-sized swimming pool and elaborate terraces. During Hearst's residency, an entire wing was added, along with a private cinema screening room. Lush, formal gardens, fountains, and even a lighted tennis court adorn the grounds, which originally totaled around 3.7 acres, but later expanded with adjacent lots to about 5.5 acres today. In its day, the Beverly House was one of Beverly Hills's most extravagant properties. Hearst and Davies got it for a relative bargain. $120K was modest even in 1946, about $1.8 million in today's dollars. But thereafter poured money into enlarging and maintaining it. It became synonymous with wealth and power. In the late 20th century, it gained renown as one of LA's priciest estates. It was listed for a record $195 million in 2016. Though it never sold at that price, it did fetch $63 million at auction in 2021. The sheer scale house, approximately 29,000 square feet across multiple structures, and its cinematic history drive its value. It's often cited as the famed Hearst Mansion, underscoring how its lavish reputation endures. Under Hearst and Davies, the Beverly House became an opulent social hub. The couple's influence attracted the era's elite, politicians, like Winston Churchill, and Hollywood stars alike. In 1953, it even housed a honeymoon. Newlyweds John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy stayed at the estate, making headlines. Decades earlier, Davies threw spectacular parties here. Given Hearst's stature, guests ranged from film stars to business magnates. In modern times, the mansion has appeared in films and music videos. Aside from The Godfather, it's seen in The Bodyguard and Beyoncé's Black is King. It's also been used for big charity galas and political fundraisers in recent years, cementing its role as a place where history and Hollywood intersect. 16. Enchanted Hill, the Francis, Marion, and Fred Thompson Estate, Angelo Drive, Beverly Crest. The couple acquired approximately 24 acres in 1924 to 1925 and built their dream home in 1927. They named it Enchanted Hill, reportedly coined by neighbor Greta Garbo. Enchanted Hill sat atop one of Beverly Hills's highest ridges, comprising a Spanish colonial revival mansion designed by Wallace Neff. The main house was expansive and elegant, with white stucco walls, a red tile roof, and wrought iron detailing typical of Neff's style. It featured luxurious touches like a grand staircase and arched doorways framing views of the city below. The estate originally included horse stables for Thompson's riding hobby, tennis courts, formal gardens, and a large swimming pool, essentially a full suite of amenities on the mountaintop. Because the property eventually expanded to 120 acres over subsequent sales, the grounds were vast, with private roads and trails. The home's position afforded 360-degree views from downtown Los Angeles to the Pacific Ocean, making it a literal pinnacle of Hollywood luxury. In the late 1920s, building on a remote hilltop was an expensive proposition. Thompson reportedly bought the first few acres for just $1,600, but assembling the full estate and constructing the mansion cost far more. In 1929, after Thompson's death, Marion sold Enchanted Hill for $540,000, an astronomical price for that era, reflecting the estate's uniqueness. Over time, the property's size and potential drove its value into tens of millions. Paul Allen purchased it for $20 million in 1997, mainly for the land. Its final listing by Allen's trust was a whopping $150 million for the acreage. Even though the original house is gone, just the land sold for $65 million in 2022. This trajectory underscores how Enchanted Hill was always synonymous with top-tier value. First for its lavish home, later for its unrivaled land. Marion and Thompson enjoyed only a short, idyllic time on their Enchanted Hill. Tragically, Thompson stepped on a rusty nail and died of tetanus in 1928, only a year after the house was built. Grief-stricken, Marion sold the estate in 1929. Thereafter, Enchanted Hill passed through various wealthy owners, each adding land. In the 1940s, one owner built an airstrip on the property. In the 1980s, another dreamt of a golf course. Grand plans often swirled around this enchanted site. But the most fateful chapter came with Paul Allen, who in the late 1990s demolished the original mansion to plan a modern mega-compound. Allen's untimely death in 2018, echoing Thompson's fate in a way, meant he never realized his plans. Thus, multiple owners, including its first, didn't get to fully enjoy the paradise they envisioned on Enchanted Hill, lending the estate an aura of poignancy. 17. Owlwood Estate, 141 South Carrollwood Drive, Holmby Hills. Completed in 1936, designed by architect Robert D. Farquhar. Schenck acquired it in the late 1940s. The name Owlwood was given by owners in 1976. Owlwood is a Tuscan-inspired Mediterranean villa and one of Holmby Hills' grandest mansions. The main house spans around 12,000 square feet. It sits on what is now a 10-acre compound, after adjacent properties were added. The mansion's design includes a limestone facade, a graceful clay tile roof, and opulent interior finishes, coffered ceilings, marble floors, and carved fireplaces. It has palatial formal rooms, a 70-foot living room, a wood-paneled study, and a dining room with gilded details. Outside, the grounds feature rolling lawns, a huge swimming pool, tennis court, and several guest houses discreetly placed among mature trees. During Schenck's ownership, a state-of-the-art screening room was added for private film viewings. The property is famed for its towering owl statues, perched at the gates and in the gardens, symbols of wisdom that later gave Owlwood its name. Of particular note, Owlwood directly abutted the homes of some other celebrities, like Esther Williams and Jane Mansfield. which in the 2000s merged into the estate, making it unusually large even for Holmby Hills. Owlwood has consistently been among Los Angeles's most expensive residential properties. In the 1930s, building a 12,000-square-foot masterpiece with Farquhar, a top architect who also did Beverly Hills' Greystone, ensured no expense was spared. Italian marble, European antiques, and custom everything. Over time, each famous owner invested in the estate. Cher's extensive 1970s renovation landed it in Architectural Digest, demonstrating the level of luxury. By the 2010s, with 10 acres assembled, Owlwood was listed off-market for an astounding $150 million. It finally sold in 2020 for $88 million, still ranking among the highest prices ever in LA. The combination of size, location on Billionaires Row, and star pedigree, Marilyn Monroe was a frequent guest of Schenk's here, makes Owlwood a trophy estate of incomparable worth. 18. Jack Warner's estate, 1801 Angelo Drive, Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills. Warner began acquiring the land, 3 acres, in 1926, expanded the property to 9.4 acres by 1958-1937, and by the late 1930s had completed major expansions to the existing house with architect Roland Cote. Often heralded as the apex of studio mogul estates, Jack Warner's property centers on a neo-Georgian mansion of about 13,000 square feet. The mansion's design is dignified and symmetrical, with a brick facade and a grand columned portico reminiscent of a southern plantation house. Interior decorator William Haynes, a former actor-turned-designer, crafted luxurious but livable spaces inside. There is a famous garden room with hand-painted wall murals, a formal dining room seating 22, and a lavish screening room. The estate's grounds, designed by Florence Yoch, are perhaps its greatest glory. Warner's estate includes a 9-hole golf course, complete with sand traps and putting greens, set in a private valley. It also features a gorgeous pool area, a pool house, and multiple guest cottages, one of which was regularly used by Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s. Sweeping lawns, rose gardens, and specimen trees make the property feel like an English park. In sum, the Warner estate was so extensive and well-appointed that in 2008 it was described as the archetypal studio mogul's estate. None before or since quite surpassed its size, grandeur, or sheer glamour. Jack Warner's estate was the symbol of Hollywood power and wealth. At its completion, Jeffrey Hyland, historian of LA estates, noted, "No studio czar's residence has ever surpassed it." Maintaining a private golf course, multiple buildings, and manicured acreage in Beverly Hills is enormously costly. When Warner's widow finally sold it in 1990, David Geffen paid $47.5 million, a record at that time for a home. After Geffen's own careful restoration, Jeff Bezos purchased it in 2020 for $165 million, setting another record. These figures reflect not just real estate inflation, but the estate's singular status. It's effectively a private resort in the middle of Beverly Hills, a luxury only a few billionaires can contemplate. In Jack Warner's era, the estate hosted countless stars, politicians, and royalty. The Warner dinners were high affairs, imagine James Cagney, or Bette Davis sipping cocktails by the pool, or heads of state visiting during World War II. The estate also had a wartime role. Warner allowed fundraisers for Allied relief on the grounds. After Jack's death in 1978, the estate remained frozen in time under his widow Anne until 1990. Geffen then modernized infrastructure but kept its classic style. He occasionally lent the mansion for filming and allowed it to be used for charity events, and at least one presidential fundraiser. Each steward recognized this estate as a national treasure. It's even been a talking point in media about how new moguls love old Hollywood estates, with Bezos's purchase drawing attention to its pedigree. 19. Harold Lloyd's Green Acres Estate, 1740 Green Acres Drive, Beverly Hills. Lloyd bought 15 acres in Benedict Canyon in 1923 for $100,000, started building in 1926, and moved in by 1929. The estate was dubbed Green Acres in 1936. Green Acres was an enormous Mediterranean Revival mansion and estate. The main house had 44 rooms and spanned 32,000 square feet, at the time the largest and most expensive home ever built by a Hollywood star. The mansion's architecture, by Sumner Spalding and Weber, blended Italian Renaissance and Spanish influences. A creamy stucco exterior with loggias and arcades, plus a medieval-style tower. Inside were opulent spaces, like a 50-foot living room with a beamed ceiling, a teakwood-lined theater, multiple dining rooms, and even an indoor fountain. Lloyd outfitted every room with either authentic antiques or custom-made furnishings. The estate grounds were equally extraordinary. Lloyd installed 12 distinct gardens, including a formal rose garden, a Japanese garden, and a desert garden, tended by dozens of gardeners. There were 12 fountains bubbling across the property. For recreation, Green Acres offered a full 9-hole golf course complete with a clubhouse that looked like an old English mill and a 900-foot canoe stream with a waterfall. A grand Olympic-sized swimming pool was one of the largest private pools in Southern California when built. Other structures included stables, greenhouses, and a 4-room play cottage for Lloyd's daughter, with its own barn. Over 30 servants lived on site to manage the estate, which even had a private telephone system. Lloyd reportedly spent around $2 million building Green Acres, an astronomical sum in the 1920s. Indeed, it was the priciest home any film star lived in during that decade. Every facet was grand, from land acquisition to architecture to the tiniest decor details. Lloyd was determined to create a personal kingdom, and he succeeded. The estate's operating costs were also enormous. Maintaining a staff of 30-plus and extensive grounds was like running a small village. By the 1970s, as upkeep overwhelmed his heirs, the property sold for just $1.6 million in a dilapidated state. A far cry from its building cost, but reflecting the challenge of such a scale. Major events and fate. Harold Lloyd loved Green Acres deeply. In 1929, he held a 3-day housewarming party to celebrate moving in, and thereafter, Green Acres became known for joyful social gatherings. 4th of July fiestas with fireworks, charity carnivals opened to the public, and endless weekends of golf with Hollywood friends. After Lloyd's death in 1971, he wanted Green Acres to become a museum, but without sufficient endowment, the plan failed. The estate fell into disrepair. By 1975, much of the acreage was subdivided and the gardens were decimated. The main mansion itself was vandalized and nearly condemned as it sat empty. 20. Marion Davies's Ocean House, 415 Pacific Coast Highway, Santa Monica. Built in 1929 for Marion Davies, financed by William Randolph Hearst, often simply called Marion Davies Beach House, it stood on Santa Monica's Gold Coast through the 1930s to 40s. Davies's Ocean House was a massive Georgian revival mansion designed by architect Julia Morgan. It was a 3-story, 110-room palace by the sea, literally one of the largest private homes ever built on a beach. Morgan's design included stately columns and huge verandas facing the ocean. Inside, it had dozens of bedrooms, around 34, and multiple grand salons for entertaining. The interiors were opulently furnished in English Georgian style. Lots of Chippendale furniture, crystal chandeliers, and custom silk wall coverings. Davies's favorite space was the gold-leafed ballroom, Gold Room, for formal parties. The estate covered 5 acres of beachfront and comprised 5 buildings in total. Aside from the main mansion, there were 4 large guest houses to host friends and family, and to house Davies' 32 servants. The grounds included 2 swimming pools, one indoor, one outdoor, tennis courts, and an ornate Italianate pergola. A decorative Venetian marble bridge spanned a pool, connecting parts of the garden. The level of detail was extraordinary. For instance, Hearst installed an entire pub room salvaged from an old English inn. As actress Colleen Moore quipped, it was the biggest house on the beach between San Diego and Vancouver. The final cost of building and furnishing Ocean House was a staggering $7 million, circa 1930, about $110 million today. This included $3 million on construction and $4 million on luxurious furnishings. It was so extravagant that even Hearst joked it was larger than the White House. Davies, a major film star with Hearst's vast resources behind her, essentially had a personal seaside hotel. The carrying costs were high, too. The household staff and constant stream of high society guests meant huge operating expenses. Unsurprisingly, after Hearst fell into financial troubles in the 1940s, the estate was sold in 1947 for only $600,000, a fraction of its cost. Marion Davies was a famed hostess, and her Santa Monica estate was party central during the 1930s. She and Hearst threw legendary costume balls and charity events at Ocean House. The guest list often included virtually every big name in Hollywood, as well as political figures. Notably, the estate served as the venue for ceremonies and soirees that couldn't be held at Hearst's distant San Simeon. Everyone from Chaplin to Jean Harlow to Franklin D. Roosevelt visited at one time or another. The estate also had a somewhat notorious side. Its secluded beach and lavish guest bungalows were rumored to host more private rendezvous among Hollywood's elite, away from prying eyes. It truly was a playground for the rich and famous, complete with its own speakeasy during Prohibition. As World War II approached, lavish parties quieted down, but Davies opened the property for USO events to support troops, showing its versatility.